and the Duchess of Sussex has suffered a setback in her case against Associated Newspapers. It's a parent company of the Mail Online and Mail on Sunday, after a judge ruled that part of her case should be struck out. Well, we can get more detail on this now. Joining me from the firm Killinchi is the international media lawyer Paul Tweed. Afternoon to you, Paul. Now, this was a preliminary ruling, wasn't it, in this fairly wide-ranging case? Just talk us through what it means.
Good afternoon. Yes, this would not be an uncommon situation in media litigation. What happens is both sides have to put their case in writing in the form of a court pleading. And in the case of the Duchess's lawyers, in their particulars of claim, in the arguments they were putting forward on her behalf, they included various allegations that Associated Newspapers had been acting dishonestly, that they had been deliberately trying to stir up a conflict between Meghan and her father. And this aspect of their complaint, and this is only part of the Duchess's claim, of course. I mean, her primary complaint is a claim based on misuse of private information, breach of her data, and copyright infringement. But this particular aspect was the focus of Associated's preliminary attack. And there was a remote hearing several weeks ago, and the judge now has given his ruling that this aspect of the claim, of Meghan's claim, should be struck out. So it's first blood to Associated. This will narrow the battleground, albeit the case has still a long way to go. There are still the broader, the core legal issues to be determined. But this will be a significant factor in terms of the witnesses that may be required or called on behalf of both parties. And from Associated's point of view, it is sending out, quite a strong message from the outset that, if they have got it wrong, if there is a breach of the law, and if there's been a misuse of private information, misuse of Meghan's data, well, then that will be a separate legal issue, which they will continue to fight, but that they were not motivated by bad faith or dishonesty. And I think this is an important ruling for them.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you to further clarify there. You were sort of hinting at it, saying it's going to narrow the focus of the case and might change the witnesses that can be called, etc. Does the fact that that Associated has been successful here, does that strengthen their hand for the rest of the case?
It's certainly the core fundamental issues are still to be tried, and they are still very much open here. And that's in this fundamental factor. There was a personal letter, and that personal letter has been published by a Sunday newspaper. And there are a number of the fundamental issues that will need to be heard and determined by the court, not least as to whether it was in the public interest for this personal letter to be published, or whether it was something that the public would simply be interested in, which is a completely different scenario. And the court are going to have to determine this very important issue and very fundamental issue at the substantive hearing of the case.